wouldn't hold us
All right.
old standard.
Good afternoon, everyone.
On that one, I would.
Because Bob told me.
I know we have folks still coming in, but we want to get started on time to make sure that you can get to your next session on time as well. Good afternoon again. I am Quentin Suffren. I'm a senior advisor with ExcelinEd, and we are excited to talk with you today about a topic that's getting a lot of discussion already here at the summit and in general in state houses, in state education agencies, and in schools even throughout the nation. So I am first and foremost thankful and grateful to have this wonderful panel join me today. We're going to talk about what do we mean by high school redesign? What does it look like in different states? What are the priorities and outcomes and objectives that folks are trying to address? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities that folks are facing? Because this is a topic that is not only of interest to folks, but pretty complex. And I'll just say it up front that we all know high school needs to change. At the same time, it is the one thing for many of us who grew up in this country that we have in common, like it or not. It was a rite of passage. So we have to make sure that we can have that vision for what something different looks like and what it's going to mean for students and parents and their families if that change is really going to take root. And again, I'm pleased to be joined by folks who are doing this work. Just to my right, if you haven't met Scott, this is Scott Laban, president of Colorado Succeeds. We have Speaker Todd Houston from the great state of Indiana, Chairwoman Terry Collins from the great state of Alabama, and Jeffrey Landward, who is Commissioner of the Higher Education Board in the state of Utah. So thank you all for joining me. I am going to just give a little bit of additional level setting for our discussion today, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time hearing from these folks here, but also we'll try to save some time at the end for questions. We have mics in the center, so if you do want to ask a question, I'd ask you to go ahead and write that down now so that if we do have time that you can come up and make sure that you get time to address the panelists directly. But when we think about redesign of high school, lots of folks are talking about it. It is one of those things that when we talk about pathways, for example, it's a term that's been bandied around quite a bit, but what do we really mean by it? And the answer is both simple and complex at the same time, a lot like this work. It's simple in saying that it needs to change, it's outdated, it's all these things. Complex in the way of, well, it depends on who you're talking to, where you are, and what their priorities are. And so instead of trying to say, here's what high school should look like and that change should be for every single student across the nation and states, we want to have this conversation about what does it mean in states and communities who have set specific priorities and then are allowing that work to continue, sometimes all the way down to the local level with flexibility, and other times that's beginning that work at the state level and saying, you know what, we need some common definitions, some common expectations around what we mean by things like credentials of value or what we mean by work-based learning, all of these things that are kind of part of the conversation. So I will just say before we jump in that instead of trying to realize what it should look like, at ExcelinEd we attempted to say let's stop with the redesign discussion and talk about leveling up high school for two reasons. One is that redesign is often a misnomer. We are not jettisoning wholesale or whole cloth the high schools that are currently in practice. We still have funding systems. We still have accountability systems. All of those things are still there. This is really about how do we change and augment this experience and make it more relevant and more real world connected for students. And the second is, at the end of the day, different student experiences should be different depending on where they are, what their interests are, and what their communities have prioritized is important. And so thinking about those things, what can we say that is common? And that is, when we think about leveling up the high school experience, it really does boil down to and the things that are being prioritized that are coming to the surface. And that is that we want to see robust exploration of careers earlier in middle school, leading into high school, so folks can say, I know kind of what I'm interested in, even if I'm not making that decision yet, but I know some things that I want to pursue. And then taking that to the next step and saying, what does that look like in terms of my options? Does that mean I'm going to explore career-connected classrooms? Am I going to have a chance to engage in some work-based learning and college credit-bearing courses? I might actually pursue education that doesn't take place on the high school campus at all, right? I might be in the workplace. I might be getting credit for things that are happening elsewhere. And how does a state, how does a district, a school, a principal, all the way down, actually manage that process? And that's where we get to that complex part again. But at the end of the day, we can say that we want a more and better, frankly, experience, more detailed and flexible experience for learners, and a better overall sense of the relevance and purpose that students are taking away from this experience. So without further ado, I'm going to switch to why you're here today, and that's to hear from our panel. And I will just ask each of you to kind of take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about what this leveling up really means to you, either your state, from the work that you're doing, and what are the priorities that you're seeking to address in doing so. So I'm going to start with Speaker Houston, actually.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. It's a tough crowd right after lunch. Everybody's full, so but I appreciate everybody being here. Look, in Indiana, a couple of years ago, we just kind of committed to the fact that we wanted Indiana high school students to have a relevant experience. And right now, this statistic is common across the country. 47% of the kids that graduate from Indiana high school are not going to go to a 2 or 4 year college immediately afterwards. And yet, we're literally providing them no high school experience of value. They're not getting a credential. They're not getting, an associate's degree. And so, we began, Dr. Jenner's led this work for us. We got tremendous leadership in the House and the Senate, and Chairman Boehning and Chairman Rotz, to say, look, we just have to think about this differently. Now, the great part is I screwed all this stuff up because I tend to want to move faster than we should. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of this stuff is being done already in your high schools. This isn't revolutionary. I mean, you have work-based programs, you have things that are taking place but they're done in isolation. They're not done at any level of scale. So what we've just been trying to do in Indiana is take and remove the structures that prevent that, create funding systems that support it, and then, encourage and highlight the schools that are already doing it or expanding doing it. My buddy who's here, my kind of mentor in all this, Tony Bennett, had a great expression, gentle pressure relentlessly applied. I kind of do the pressure and relentless well. Probably don't do the gentle very well, but, you have to just keep pushing every day to help people think about how do you give those kids those options. Because I'll tell you I'll finish with just the relevancy thing. You can go, because I'm in politics, I get to speak to a lot of different audiences, some who think I'm okay, some who thinks I have horns and a pitchfork. When I talk about this issue, it's uniformly. It's people's heads are yeah, because they have a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a brother or sister who didn't get a relevant high school experience. So it was a complete waste of time. And they go, it didn't make sense for them, so why did it make sense for me if I went to a 2 or 4 year college, but this person left? And from a state perspective, it's a tragedy for a whole host of reasons, but the stupidest thing a state does is we know where a kid is between the ages of 5 and 18, 180 days a year. We know where they are. And then they graduate from high school with no credential, no degree, and then we have this thing called the Department of Workforce Development that spends millions of dollars to go find those people and then retrain them or train them up. And so it's a completely backward system that's failed kids for way too long. And I honestly, God, believe people want to change it. We just have to facilitate those changes.
That's great. Representative Collins.
I think we had very similar thoughts. I love working with these legislators. They're great. I think they are ahead of the curve most of the time. As we think about doing this, one of the reasons it's really important in Alabama is that while we have a really, really low unemployment rate, we have a very low participation rate. And so that group of people that we no longer know where they are or what they're doing are not at work. And so we needed to change that parameter. And we didn't have an exit exam in Alabama. If you graduated from high school, basically you were still just breathing. There wasn't really a lot of qualifications behind it. And so a few years ago, we passed what we called a college and career readiness, that in order to graduate from high school, we gave it a 3-year runway, and it's not this year, but the next year. In order to graduate from an Alabama high school, you're going to have either a college indicator, which is you've passed a dual enrollment class, or you've passed a AP course, or you've benchmarked on your ACT, and we provide payment for that testing for every student, or you've been a part of an international baccalaureate program. Anyway, something that shows you're ready to go to college, or something that shows you're ready, an indicator that says you're ready to go to career, which would be a credential of value, which would be the military entrance exam, which would be work keys, a silver or a gold standard. Maybe you did a career tech pathway in college. That was your whole curriculum. Different things. You did apprenticeship. You did that. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to do to make sure when our students leave that they are actually prepared to go to the next path, whatever that path may look like. We're doing a lot more with career tech in schools all around. I wanted to tell 2 quick stories about it. First of all, about 13 is when we started paying for students in high school to be participate in dual enrollment programs. One of the stories I love the best, you're having to tell parents, you're having to let them know that their student's going to be doing this. Is that all that right? You've got to get permission. Well, what we loved, and I hoped would happen across the state, but in a few places around Alabama, as the parents were hearing about the opportunities for the workforce and what it took to be involved and all, they got interested in participating. And so if we could create that enthusiasm about being in a workforce and something you want to do and you're excited about, that would be great. Well, in my community, we actually have a career academies of 2 high schools were participating, but now it's its own standalone high school. And as I visit them, my favorite day, I always love to say this, is the students that were preparing in a career tech program to go into the healthcare field. They had been at our hospital that day. They had actually been in a delivery room, and 3 of them saw this baby being born. And I mean, they are all in from now on. So creating relevancy for our students so that they are so excited about, and they understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they're ready to go into the next thing. And so that's a lot of our why, is making sure they're prepared, but also finding ways to get them actually hands-on, working in those fields, seeing what they want to do, and I think it's going to be making a difference.
Thank you. Yeah, I think these themes of relevancy are coming out in different ways, and also relevancy to different sectors, different groups of folks in the state and their priorities. Commissioner Landry, how about Utah?
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. It's the first time I've attended this conference, and I'm getting the impression that there's not many people from higher ed that attend. And I'm also getting the impression that some of the relationships between K through 12 and higher ed aren't super strong. And that has been so insightful for me today, because as coming in as Commissioner of Higher Education for the state of Utah, one of the first things I identified as an immediate fix is the lack of partnership between our K through 12 system and higher education, for all of the reasons that have been articulated here today already. We talk about wanting to make sure students are leaving with a credential of value. And in my view, our obligation as a higher education system is to provide those credentials. Where we provide them, in what setting we provide them, and at what time we provide them shouldn't matter. So we're working now to identify ways where we have K through 12 and higher ed are two completely different systems with different governing boards. One is elected, one's appointed by the governor. They're operating oftentimes in different directions. And so the immediate thing that we needed to do was reestablish relationships where we're going to have a common vision and a common goal for our high school students. And that should be a credential. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was start to identify what's some scaffolding that we can start to build this relationship on. And there's some things that we already had in place. We have a very robust concurrent enrollment system in Utah. We have 30% or more of our high school students are taking college courses through concurrent enrollment in the state. That's 60,000 students in our high school system taking concurrent enrollment. We have saved over $86 million of tuition to this point through our concurrent enrollment program. Earlier today in one of the sessions, in the two chief session, someone mentioned that there's resistance from higher education to do these kind of partnerships because it destroys our business model, that the revenue comes from tuition. And the revenue comes from bringing students into our system and keeping them there because then they keep writing tuition checks. That's absolutely true. And the fact of the matter is that if that is going to be how we're going to be making decisions, then we're not making decisions in the best interest of the student. We're making decisions to perpetuate and preserve a system that isn't working well anymore and isn't meeting the needs of our state and our employers. Yeah, wasn't expecting that, but listen. And so we have to just completely disregard what the impact is from a revenue standpoint and just say, we have students who are leaving high school without a credential. How do we fix it? The best way to fix it is to make it easier to get into our system and get out of our system fast. And we can have a bigger impact if we're going into the other system and partnering with them to get the credential there. So we build on concurrent enrollment. We start to build on a framework of a first credential program, where right now we're thinking about designing high school with the end in mind being a first credential of some kind, one of value. And if that means that it's a technical certificate, we have a technical system that is part of our higher education system, 8 technical colleges that we can partner with. We can build concurrent enrollment certificates that are intended to be strategic for people to be on pathways that once they enter into our system, they're already well on their way to a degree or certificate in a specific occupation, not just taking general education or random courses without any strategy in place. And then the last thing that we did was, it astonished me when I asked this question, but I have 16 institutions of higher education in Utah. Only 2 are limited enrollment and have enrollment standards for admission. Everybody else is open admission. Yet everybody had applications. Everybody had application fees. We'd have application nights where we'd go into the high schools and the students would sit down and fill out 3, 4, 5, 6 applications. And the question I asked is, aren't we asking for the same information? And if you're an open admission institution, why do you care beyond what's your name? And so the first thing we did was we eliminated all application fees. The second thing we did was we started a direct admissions program. I know that that's not new and revolutionary. Some states have done it and done it well. We're trying to take that and expand it significantly and then just do away with applications altogether. These are just some areas to try and build that pipeline to make sure students are getting something.
Great, thank you. We can vouch for Commissioner Landwehr if you're in a state that has friction with higher ed. So thank you. Scott, tell us about, you've been at this work for a long time in Colorado, and the priorities have always been around kind of rethinking this process. But what are the priorities that you've seen evolve, and where are you now in Colorado?
Yeah, happy to. And so for those of you who don't know Colorado Succeeds, we're a coalition of business leaders. And the fact of the matter is, in our state, Colorado's kids are not ready for Colorado's jobs. And if you look at the data, you'll see that 90% of the jobs in our state that pay a living wage require some kind of credential beyond high school. Yet, when you look at the stats in our state, only 30% of Colorado's own students are receiving some kind of credential beyond high school within 6 years. And so the supply and demand lines just don't meet. That's why we're at this conversation. We've been able to mask this for a long time in our state because we're a net importer of talent. So a lot of people move into our state to take the high skilled jobs, and they bring their degrees with them. But we're really leaving behind Colorado's own kids. And so we've placed a moral and an economic imperative on homegrown talent. And the way that we think about that is in a handful of ways. But number one, we got to get kids back engaged in school. Chronic absenteeism has been a huge issue in our state, as I'm sure it is for many of yours. A third of high school students are not showing up to school. And so when we talk about relevance, this is a key component, is helping kids answer that age-old question of why am I learning this and when will this ever matter to me in my life? And then the second part of that is, helping make sure that young people see a caring adult outside of their educator in the classroom or outside the classroom through their work-based learning experiences, because we know that young people who build social capital are going to be stronger, have stronger networks, and be more successful as they try and move into their next step. And so those are some of the reasons why we're so focused on this.
That's great. I think we're hearing some themes here, right? The relevance piece, how do we lower barriers that are more system-centered than student-centered? We see that a lot. And this idea of helping not only students explore their interests, but also helping them see themselves in those occupations or in those roles and so forth. I want to dig a little bit.
Quentin, the one thing I think that you heard consistently, I think when people hear people talk about this, some people hear, well, you're lowering the bar. And I just think that's insane, largely offensive. The fact of the matter is that we're setting a level of expectations for all kids. The pathway they choose, it can be as robust if you're in the trades as if you're going to go to an engineering school. I think that's a big barrier. Is well, it sounds like you're higher ed who have been good partners for us in a lot of this work. We have to push them. The entire high school transcript was designed for higher ed, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole schedule in high school is designed for the high school transcript. It's about 50 kids aren't going to, but I think that 50%. But I think the thing that we always have to be conscious of, and why employers are so important to this, is the system's never going to meet the needs of the employers because we're years behind it. If we came to this conference 5, 6, 7 years ago, everybody was sitting here talking about how do we get more computer coders, computer coding. There are 30% fewer job listings for computer coding today than there were 2 years ago because of AI. So, this is you've got to build a system in which the employers are giving you the feedback. You're giving kids ample opportunity to take things and apply that learnings. Maybe 10%, 90% of the jobs in America need a mastery of Algebra 1. 90% of the jobs need a mastery of Algebra 1. So, teach every kid Algebra 1 well, and then use a lot of applied math for a lot of the other coursework. But it doesn't, the whole rigor argument is just, it's a false argument to scare people. Particularly, it's a false argument to scare people at means who feel like their kid might not get into if you offer these types of programs, it might challenge them from getting into the highly selective universities.
Yep. I think you raised an incredible point here, which is that part of the complexity of doing this leveling up or doing this redesign is that we're asking for two different things at the same time. One is we're saying we got to make sure we cover all those bases, that everybody gets all of those math. And by the way, we can't lower standards, and we can't. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm saying, so we're going to die on the hill of this course or that course and so forth. At the same time, we are also asking students to make decisions earlier, frankly, about what they interest and what they pursue. It doesn't mean they're locked into those, but we are asking them and offering them options to explore those interests sooner. And if you really want to do that, that means prioritizing certain things over others. And so that is the delicate dance that I think everybody is finding themselves in terms of how do we maintain that rigor? How do we also allow for what is going to bring that relevance into the play and allow for that skill development, for that credential attainment to actually take place? Because right now we do have too many students who are saying, I don't know why I'm here, and I don't really care, right? So I want to dig into some of the specific policies that each of these states have explored, in some cases gone quite deep in. And one of those is credentials of value. It's a topic, again, that comes up. What that means varies by state, and oftentimes too much so by state, because these are degrees and often industry credentials that should have value in most states. We look across regions, you see a lot of economic diversity in terms of supply demands and supply and demand and those needs. At the same time, we know healthcare, we know IT, we know different. Now, what those jobs look like will be different, but we know where those jobs are going to be needed. So on the credentials of value side, I don't know how many people have really looked at what Alabama has done over the past several years. It's quite intensive. But Representative Collins, I'd love for you to share kind of that work and how it's been prioritized as one of these outcomes for high school.
I'm happy to. One of the things that we did, and we've not used this word before too, though, is that we've narrowed some of these skills and some of this performance as a skill. We're using that word. And we've then taken, employers have helped us, and they have actually looked at what they're looking for as their job requirement and not put a degree or a title on it, but put the skill they're looking for. And so what we've created in Alabama is the first ever skills-based marketplace. And what it does is it lines in each sector, because in Alabama, if you're in North Alabama, you may be more interested in rockets or defense or space. And if you're in South Alabama, you may be more building boats and planes. And, different areas have different things. So we work regionally. But what we've done is we've gotten employers to list the skills they're looking for. We let students and job seekers, because a lot of them are out of the school system already, but they can use the same marketplace, and they can look at, do a survey and find out what their skill sets are, and then see what aligns to the jobs that are in their area. We've already built this. We have a pilot program so far. We have 20,000 students that are signed up on this marketplace. We have 10,000 employers. We have 900 jobs. And so far, 50,000 credentials of value are coming forward, which is what we're really looking for, trying to build those partnerships with all of the school systems from K-12, community college, higher education. Build that and cross over with employers, with career centers, with chambers of commerce, different people, making sure everybody knows about it. Now, that's not happening yet. It's a pilot, but it's already starting to move forward, and they're seeing a lot of excitement. We're also hoping other states join in with us, because that makes it a lot more profitable when you can look at jobs in other areas where you might want to be, and hoping people will come and look at our jobs as well. So that's kind of what we're doing, trying to build those partnerships, trying to increase and grow this. I like the picture you're looking at too, because that's exactly what it's designed to do, is let you have on-ramps and off-ramps. If you're in school and you need to go to work, then you go to work. You realize this job's not going to take me where I want to go. I need to get some type of a credential of value. Where can I get that? This marketplace shows you all of that. It shows it to you regionally, and I think it's going to be a game changer for the state.
Great, thank you. Yeah, on the credential value side, I mean, Scott, Colorado has done work for a long time on kind of incentivizing those, looking at those. But you've also started to really think about work-based learning, what counts as a credential, and then also more recently, kind of what does the senior year look like? So it gets back to both, something that a couple of folks have said around like where this happens, how it happens. We need to be a little bit more agnostic to that. Can you talk about like where Colorado is?
Yeah, happy to. So Colorado has three main goals for all high school students, regardless of where you live. And those would be that we call them our big three. Basically, that you'll have access to a high-quality work-based learning experience, 12 credits of post-secondary credit, and a industry certification, all in an aligned pathway. And if you have access to all three, we expect that you're going to get at least one of those. And so there's been really three main strategies that the state has deployed to try and create that level of access. The first has really been about redesigning high school in a lot of ways with new programs and opportunities. We can talk a little bit about concurrent enrollment, but a lot of that is limited based on the qualifications of the educators. And so the state has provided grants so that teachers can get out and try to get master's masters in programs and in fields that are aligned with our economy to make sure that there's more people able to teach the skills that business is looking for. Another areas are incentives for industry certifications and credentials, which provide outcomes-based financial bonuses to high schools when young people earn certifications that are aligned to industry's need. And importantly, that list is updated on an annual basis by industry. There's also this program that you mentioned called Path Forward, which basically says if you're going to come in and graduate early, which we know a lot of low-income families and students need to do so they can get to work and start providing for their family, they're going to get the per-pupil revenue that otherwise would have gone to their school to redesign their senior year. They can use that for education and training in the post-secondary space or in the workforce space. To make all of that happen, and apprenticeships are a big focus in Colorado as well. A lot of us have been to Switzerland and seen that model, tried to bring that back. And so what has also been a big enabler in this is getting rid of seat time, because to your point, and the point of many folks up here, education happens everywhere, and if we're only counting and providing dollars when it happens in the four walls of the school building, we're missing out on a significant amount. So that's been the part at the high school level. The second major strategy has been, if you're going to do all this in high school and you're going to provide all these amazing experiences, let's make sure they count when you go to your next step. And so really focusing in on guaranteed transfer and making sure that they not only transfer as credit, but general education credit, not just elective credit. So it actually does defray some of those costs. Another component of it is the credentials or post-secondary credit for prior work experience. And that could be in the military. That could be in business. That could be in an apprenticeship. And then the third major strategy has been around employer engagement. And so, as we all know, companies have been designed and operationalized to make a profit. And so we're asking them now to do something that's very different in terms of helping co-educate and co-create the talent of the future. And so one of the things that we've done is provided resources, grants, technical assistance to companies who want to get their HR departments leveled up and try and help provide more of these opportunities. They've also provided financial tax credits to companies that take on apprenticeships. And they have worked to encourage and require, to some extent, regional planning between employers, business community, government, higher ed, K-12, all in their local community to develop 2-year plans and 5-year plans that actually develop and say, what are the priorities in your region and how are you going to co-create a future that builds the education system that meets that? And in many places, we're calling that the edu-economy, trying to make sure that that education system is actually aligned with the economy and that the two are reinforcing one another and in constant communication with one another.
That's great. And for folks who don't know a ton about Colorado, I will just say that what makes this very, very interesting and impressive is the fact that it is a heavily local controlled state.
That's right.
There's not a lot of centralized kind of power at the top here that is saying, oh, everybody has to do this. And so that allows for all these different options and that customization to happen. Commissioner Landward, so we talk about post-secondary and one of the big, whether it's credentials of value or that fuller experience, it is part of the decision-making that has to happen somewhere in this leveling up process. And we, I think, forget that that's a decision that can be paralyzing for a lot of students. And in some cases, it's paralyzing to the point of like, I'm just going to sit it out for now, and I'm not sure what I want to do. How is Utah kind of addressing that information component or even the transition piece so that's easier?
Yeah. No, thank you for the question. I was listening with interest as we were mingling before the meeting, and the speaker mentioned the principle of simplicity being so important. And I'm always astonished at how complex higher education can make things. And that trend goes all the way from the academic courses to the admissions process. And in looking at what a student has to navigate, we just simply thought this has to be dead simple. Because if it's a barrier on its own, then we're already doing ourselves a disservice with the very first interaction that a student has with our system. So in building on this idea of we have a system of 16 institutions, 16 public institutions, 8 of those are technical colleges, 14 of which are open admission, we could start with the premise of students are already admitted to 14 institutions. How can we make that information simple to get to, and how can we make it simple to understand what that means? So we've been working together. As I mentioned, we wanted to eventually remove the application process altogether, in knowing that if you're a student in Utah and you have graduated from high school, you are admitted and we're ready to go. And so we created a portal called admitutah.org. We just launched this about a month ago. And this is the first phase of what is really 3 phases. But the first phase is essentially to develop a portal, and we developed this with high school counselors, with high school students, with parents, with superintendents, principals, as well as admissions directors and enrollment managers or institutions, because the target audience really is those who are making that decision. AdmitUtah.org then becomes a place where they're asked 3 simple questions. What's your approximate GPA? Where are you going to high school? And what's your name? And they input that information, and then what they're presented with are all the institutions that they're admitted to. And then they can explore those different institutions, what those institutions offer, the kind of programming that they have. We launched this a month ago. We've already had 8,000 people fill out that survey. And of that, we've had well over, I think, 11,000 people click to the next level, which is, I want to go here. What do I have to fill out? And that exceeded our wildest expectations, because this is really a soft launch. Because right now they still have to fill out an application with these individual institutions. The next phase, which will be next year, is a direct connection with our K-12 partners, to where if they fill out that information, we have an automatic exchange of information from K-12 with the needed information to know where will they go. And that includes our research universities with admission standards. And then all they need to do is say, I want to go here, and that's an automatic admission. They fill out some information to get ready to go and attend. We also are launching next month a chatbot that we've developed that essentially walks them through the very basics of what are all the financial aid options for them, how do I fill out the FAFSA, and takes them through that entire process. And then another functionality will be, if they come to us and they're not sure what kind of college experience they want, but they do know what kind of job they want, they can input that information, and then it'll tell them, here are the institutions that provide these programs, and here are the ones you're already admitted to. In other words, we're just eliminating steps completely. And we designed it in a way to where it's easy to understand. It requires very little information and very few clicks. And we're getting great feedback on this. And frankly, again, going back to higher education and our need to preserve our models and need to preserve our revenue streams, this was not without great resistance from our institutions. You ask the question, why do you still require everybody to fill out your own application if you're asking for the same thing and we're operating as a system of higher education? Why? And the answer ultimately comes down to competitive advantage. I mean, these institutions are fighting for what is a diminishing revenue source, and that is students. And as we see the enrollment continue to go down, they're just becoming more and more fierce, essentially mutually destructive tendencies on their own part. And so we wanted to take a step back and say, we've got to change the way you're thinking. We need to think only about the student experience and getting them into our system. If they go to our system or they get a credential in high school through our system, that is a success for every single one of you as institutions. It doesn't matter where they go or where they get it. The point is they got it. And that's good for the state of Utah. That's good for our economy. That's good for our employers. So we finally got them there. We finally got them across this line. The hardest part has been then to create that interchange of information between two systems. Surprisingly difficult, at least in our state. And that required, again, building those relationships, understanding the need, understanding the benefits, and being able to articulate that well. That's just one way that we can help make that decision point easier and faster to navigate.
Yeah, and for them, for students, we're just now catching up to what the experience they expect, probably. They go to any other kind of approach or kind of requirement they have to do in the real world, and it's fairly simple. That's amazing. Speaker Houston, I want to turn back to Indiana for a second, because I think one thing that's really interesting about this leveling up is that you have gone very far, if not all in, on work-based learning and really thinking about how do we provide those experiences to students while they're in high school, and even, some from on a spectrum, right? It can be anything to making sure that they have contact employers early on to, hey, they might want an apprenticeship in these areas. But And every state we talk to is like, yeah, we need more of that. But you've put some pretty interesting policy solutions behind that. Can you talk a little bit about how you're addressing that priority?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the outcome I think every student and their family aspires to is actually a job. Yeah. You know, it's this miraculous thing. And you know, so we kind of did everything we could to get in the way of that for a large period of time. And, you know, so we've gone to, you know, everything from career savings accounts, providing accounts for kids to help offset things like transportation, tools, things they might need to their job. You know, we've been engaging the employers heavily. You know, it's a challenge. I won't lie to you. It's continuing to be a challenge, but to get employers to engage and offer these kids opportunities. I remind people, we were 2 generations ago where, like, if you were 16, in a lot of instances, you were expected to drop out of high school and go work. And now we act like we're like child abuse. If you're 18, you have to go work. I mean, it's insane. So like, I mean, you know, we set these crazily low expectations for what kids can do and what they can do. And we've said to our employer community, look, we need to take these kids. By the way, you're not, if you walk in my office and you tell me you need more employees and you're not engaged in this, I'm going to ask you why not. Like, you know, you have to control your destiny. You need to train your own employees. It's the best way to do it. This is as you go to the European countries, there's a return on investment model for the company. This is not a goodwill service. They are getting the employees they need, and they're training the employees they need. We're in the process next month. We should redo our diploma requirements. We'll pass that rule on the diploma requirements, again, to give more flexibility and credit for work-based learning in different types of classes. And if Katie's in here, and I don't know if Katie's in here, Katie, are you in here? So Scott reminded me, we got to bust teacher licensures. It's a disaster in this world. I mean, it's a monster barrier. It's ridiculous. So if Katie's not here, then go find Katie, because I will, and tell her we're going to do that. And then accreditation's the other thing. I mean, you know, the problem is there's so many of these old kind of antiquated barriers that have made us feel better about quality that exist, but then present a true barrier to kids for these types of new and innovative programs. And I'll just end with, I will say I am, you know, I always want to push faster, but I've been so pleased with a number of schools, not all of them, I won't tell you that, but who now are seeing that, you know, their initial reaction is, oh, no, not again. The legislature's jacking around with us. And I get that. We do that. But they're now seeing, like, this is providing these kids all different types of opportunities, whether you're going to go directly to the workforce or whether you're going to go to Purdue or you're going to go to a highly selective institution. All these kids are getting a work-based learning experience that is meaningful, not just to their educational experience, but what they're going to do the rest of their life. And we have to be okay with the fact that some kids are going to go and they may start in the healthcare field and go through a year of healthcare and realize that isn't for them. And that's okay. They explored it. You know, hopefully they've gotten some skills out of it. But that's not a failure. And we've got to, you know, as we think about accountability systems, if we think about how we measure, you know, we have to say, look, we're gonna, you know, the expression I use all the time is you can't break broken, right? And for a lot of people a lot of kids, this system is broken. So don't tell me we have to replace the current system with perfection, because we aren't. We aren't. There's going to be kids that don't get the experience that any of us would like, because there are a bunch of kids that don't get a very good experience today. But how do you make it better, and how do you make it more relevant to them, and how do you make sure that you're rewarding the outcomes that you want through your accountability systems, through your funding systems, and giving the freedom and flexibility to the schools to be able to do the work, which I think most of them really want to do.
Yeah, if I'm picking up some of the themes of the work that you guys are doing, I mean, yes, it actually gets to that relevance component that's so necessary and missing right now. But I'm also hearing that some of the things in the barriers you're addressing are things that you wouldn't think are the huge pieces. They're not like massive kind of components. They are the death by 1,000 cuts, right? They are transportation. They are the ability to just log on and say, oh, I know, I'm already admitted to all these schools. Or I know how my skills transfer to a marketplace that I live in. You know, all of these things, and having all of this flexibility to be able to explore what that means. So that's a critical component, and I think often lost, is that some of these efforts that we've seen in states, they get bogged down in the minutia of things and not the big ideas. Because as Speaker Houston pointed out and a couple others, like, folks are pretty lined up around what needs to happen and kind of what we're looking for. So I am going to switch to the challenges, and would love for you all to kind of talk about one or two challenges that are front and center for you or for your state, and where you see it going and to address those. So, Commissioner Landward, I'll start with you this time.
And this will probably be a common theme, but the reality is this. The biggest challenge that I have faced so far in a year as serving as Commissioner of Higher Education is the absolute intransigent resistance to change, period. An unwillingness to even contemplate new ideas or new approaches because they are a drastic departure from the way we've always done things. And it is disheartening, it's frustrating, but it also cannot be an excuse for sitting on our hands and doing nothing. And as has been pointed out here today, everybody agrees we have to do something differently because we're not getting the outcomes that we need. I can't have employers continually say we don't have the workforce that we need in order to grow in your state or come to your state. I can't have 36% of our high school graduates not pursuing any post-secondary education at all and having no credential, because in the next economic downturn, when our unemployment rate is not 2% but 10%, they're the ones that suffer the most. It's just a non-debatable issue. And we have an obligation to do something differently to better prepare our students and to provide them easy access, frictionless with no barriers. And I'm talking about higher education. I'm not even talking about K through 12. Higher education is on a precipice of failure if it doesn't adjust to what is coming and do something drastically different. And I've told our presidents in the state of Utah, we are going to reimagine this system and how we operate and what we provide and how we provide it and the partnerships that we have to be willing to form. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when I hear any institution say to me it's going to kill our revenue, I've tried to make it very clear that is an absolutely unacceptable answer to why we can't do something in changing our system. It cannot be revenue-based at all. We will solve that problem in a different way. Right now, this is about the student. So I think just that resistance to change management is the biggest barrier I continue to face.
Yeah. And we've heard that a couple times in panels before this as well, this idea of change management and how do you navigate the compromises. But Representative Collins, how about for you?
I think that we're seeing a different type of student right now, too. I think the next session we're going to talk about attention to focus and trying to keep their focus on one thing. They're much more transient. They're more mobile. They don't think about things. My granddaddy retired after 42 years and my husband after 32. Well, I think that's a thing of the past. I think we've got to have on-ramps and off-ramps because they're going to want a lot of different choices over the course of their life. And so we've got to make it easier for them to prepare. And we may have to coddle more. I don't think I was coddled through any of my college experience, but yet we may have to make sure it's accessible, it's easy, there's not 2 clicks in the way of you finally getting there. We also have to follow up. Sometimes the transportation, the child care, the different barriers that get in the way, if no one in their family has ever done this before, that stops them. So we've got to have some source that comes around and looks at it and says, no, let's try to do it this way. Tries to give them a different way. That mentoring, that coaching, I think those are things. I think we've got to continue making sure that our businesses are involved in that. If they want people prepared to come into theirs, then they need to partner with all of our education, whether it's K-12, community college, or higher ed, to make sure that we're providing the things that we want. And we've got to help them be able to be persistent so that they actually get to the end of an attainment. And that attainment may come several times in their lifetime. And for the teaching profession, that's a great thing, because having teachers come into the teaching environment that have had real world work experience in different areas, that's going to be a game changer. And so I think it's just that following all the way through and keeping pushing the whole way as you go through. And that's hard because it seems easier, and I think at lunch we even heard, to just lower that bar a little bit so that everybody looks like they're doing better, but they're not. So keep that bar really hard. That's the hardest challenge.
That's a great point. So Indiana session right around the corner. Speaker Houston, how about you? The challenge, what keeps you up at night, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, look, this is like, we got the best thing going on this one, to be honest with you, because like if you poll this issue, it's extraordinarily popular. So the challenge is actually just making more people aware of it. Like, they will force the change within the system as they know that their kids and their families are going to have that, they have this opportunity. So, like, that's our challenge. It isn't like, there are things that we've done that we push that, frankly, are challenging because it's not very popular. This is overwhelmingly popular across all demographics. You walk into a rural area, suburban area, an urban area, super popular. So for us, the biggest challenge is to make more people aware of it. Look, the greatest pressure that will ever come from schools or anybody is from their own constituents. So what we're trying to do is highlight the schools that are doing it well, and then put pressure on the schools that aren't doing it, so that constituents ask them, why isn't my kid having it? In Indiana, we're very much a school choice state. About 1 in every 4 kids attend a school outside their district. Mm-hmm. So, we hope there's competitive pressure that's put on this. But I'm like super optimistic about this, because when the challenge is how do you market it better, because it's popular. Because we've pulled the heck out of it, and it is popular because it's the right thing to do first of all. But it's also nice when the right thing to do is popular. And then I do think, I'm going to respectfully disagree. The Houston family motto is "Suck it up, Buttercup." I'm not sure that I'm for coddling. I'm a little bit more for we have to set these expectations and not relent. And this is going to sound, some people in this room probably won't like this, but look, we need to give every kid every opportunity and every pathway to succeed. Some of them aren't going to take it, and I don't know what to do about that. Because that's, human nature is a battle and all this, but we've got to create a pathway. But then we have to say it's up to you to earn it. Nothing in your life do you get by being a passive interest. You have to go earn it. But if you do this is the outcome you'll earn. It's a lot better outcome if we can provide them with a certainty. And in most of these instances, we can't provide them, right, with a certainty of a job and an income level that provide for what I think most kids' expectations and hopes are. I think we've got to put it out there and say, but you got to go earn it. If you aren't going to show up for work, if you can't show up for school, if you can't do these types of things, then you have to accept the outcome that you're going to get. And so I think that's why I kind of love this area, because I'm like, we can show them something tangible. It's not like being a lifelong learner. Like, what does that get me, right? I would think I love to read, so I might be classified as a lifelong learner. But what do I get out of it? Out of an education, I can get a job, get a way to support my family, and I get to do something I love. That's something tangible that we can help these kids strive towards.
Yeah, I think that simple communication, as we've noted, is critical, and it shouldn't be a hard question to answer when a student says, "What am I doing here?" Yeah. Right? Scott, so you guys have been at this for a while and kind of implemented a lot of different solutions as we talked about. What are the challenges that you see now for Colorado?
So, there's been a fantastic amount of great work done in Colorado. One of the unintended consequences, I think, of all of the work happening is we now have a maze of a bunch of bespoke programs in high schools that all have their own constituencies. They require unique funding. They have their own application process, their own reporting requirements. There are waivers out of state law. And it's confusing. And what you get every year is those constituents that believe in one program or the other are going to fight at the legislature every year to try and fund that one. So I think we need to move away from this idea of programs and towards this idea of this is just what high school needs to look like in the future. And we have really a consulting company right now doing some research for the state of Colorado that's going to help look at all of those different programs and make some recommendations. We believe that one of those recommendations might be around consolidation of all of these different programs under one post-secondary workforce readiness umbrella that basically just says this is what high school should look like, here's the funding model to support it, and here's an aligned accountability model, because that's one of the things we know is you can put all the financial incentives in place, but if at the end of the day the accountability system doesn't give you credit for the things that we're asking you to do, it's a lot more challenging. So trying to re-examine the measures that we use for post-secondary and workforce readiness. The other big piece of it is not all of these programs are created equal. And so making sure that we take a hard look at the data and leveraging our state longitudinal data system and the reports that it's going to generate to say, what are the outcomes of these different pathway options 1, 3, 5 years down the road? And can we start to move resources and scale towards the ones that are having the most success? And can we learn from those ones and spread that idea, around the state? The other piece that I worry a lot about is even if we have that data, we don't have a great way to provide students with high-quality navigation and advising on which one to pick. I think there's a lot of information, but not necessarily easy to access or high quality or really speak to return on investment. And if you look at the majority of the reason why young people go to post-secondary education, it's to get a good job and to improve their economic mobility. And so how are schools doing at that is something that's largely unknown, and I think is something that Colorado's paying a lot of attention to and trying to get clearer answers on. And then the last thing I would say is from the business community, we expect a different set of skills, and a lot of times we call those employability skills, whether it be communications, collaboration, creativity, you name it. I don't think I've seen anybody right now who can assess those in a really consistent and high-quality way so we can understand what is the acquisition of those skills and who's doing it well and who's not.
Yeah, I think that gets at the heart of some of the things we've heard earlier today, too, which is around this issue of accountability. And I mean, yes, big A accountability, but also just small A accountability, right? And this idea that, let's all admit, wherever you are in the accountability, big A accountability spectrum, it's not working so well at high school no matter where you are, right? It's hard to measure, or what we're measuring are the proxies. They're not really telling us the stuff that a lot of people care about. And how do we get from those proxies to the outcomes that you guys are talking about? Where are they? How is that credential of value? How do we even know it's a credential of value, right? So how do we determine that and think about it?
But I think we measure high school far easier to measure K through 8 because there's multiple measures. Right? There are multiple inputs that we can look at. And I think that's the opportunity, right? I mean, you can measure those things and really go to a family and go to a school and say, are you driving the outcomes over, the complaint through K through 8 is you're going to give me the state tests are my only real measurements, right? Then we make up some softer measurements. Mm-hmm. In high school, we have all different measurements from, dual enrollment, APIB, to the state test, certifications and credentials. I think, associate's degrees. I think that's the opportunity. This is the place where we can try new things because we measure it so quantitatively to know whether we're making an impact or not.
That's fair. Yeah, the credentials of value piece, I just know I'm stuck in the middle of it right now, and it's trying to figure out what we mean by value, and it's tough, but you're right. I mean, I think, but these are the outcomes components that I think folks are really interested in. We want to spend a little bit of time. We have a couple minutes for questions if anybody has one. Please use one of the mics. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Angie Gallo. I'm a school board member in Orange County, Florida. And I love the discussion today. My question is, in high school, we have about 40-something% of students that aren't on grade level, according to our standardized test in 10th grade. Yet, across the state, our graduation rate is about 87%. So I won't even go into the fact that math's not mathing. But what happens in high school is that we spend so much time remediating and getting those students up to speed so that they can graduate and earn that diploma, that there's not a lot of time to really explore the credentials or explore different pathways because they're stuck in classes that will help them be a good student and earn that diploma. So how do we get past that barrier? What can we do better now to ensure that we can really do the leveling up of our high schools with fidelity?
Anyone want to tackle?
I mean, I'll start. I'll just say that I think what we can do is that we are there. I mean, if they're not reading, that is going to be a problem. But that's where they are right now. So you've got to take them right where they are. And if you can offer them work-based learning and an apprenticeship or something where they're doing something with their hands, and then they're having to learn how to come back and read that manual, that instructions, that whatever they've got to do. But then that applies to what they want to do. So if we can get the got to do to link to the want to do, I think that they have more incentive to do, to learn to read, to get better at that, and all, because that is where they are right now. I mean, I hope we're raising a whole generation of literate students when they get to high school. But for the ones we've got right now, we just need to make sure we're offering lots of pathways so that they can actually enjoy something about what they're doing in high school.
I would just add, we had a local company, manufacturing company, invite a group of students into his fabricating shop and basically said, go play with the things and just enjoy yourself for a little while. And he was teaching them how to use different tools and all that. The kids fell in love with it. And then he said, do you want to come work for me? And they all said yes. And he said, not if you can't read, not if you can't do numeracy, not if you can't do these fundamental skills. And so he offered all of them a work-based learning internship. And every day he said, where are you in this as it relates to your school? And at the end of the day, they still got to do both, but they could only participate in that internship, to your point, like the want to do, if they got the other work done, the got to do.
But I think you have to acknowledge, I mean, your point's totally fair. I mean, they're there, they're behind. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we're going to, if they're behind in freshmen and they come in, they're behind in math, but we're going to stick them in a sequence of algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and trig, and they're not anywhere near it. But that's what the high school master schedule says they should do, right? And I think, outside of like credit recovery, there's really not a lot of thought about how do you match up what are the science and math and the types of courses they can take that both partly catch them up, but then give them a skill. I mean, we want no kid to ever leave. We should have no expectation any kid leaves illiterate or behind. But it's also like you have to meet, like in any other industry, you have to meet the kid where he is, right? Not where you hope he or she is, but where they are to give them the type of skills that they need.
So I hate to do this, but I'm getting the signal. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask if you can, I think they'll be here for a couple minutes after if you want to ask directly their questions. But I want to thank the panel, and please join me today. Really appreciate this discussion.